Aftershocks. Delayed weaker quakes. In earthquakes, most of the energy is released by the main shocks, first quake. The rest of the energy is released by the following weaker aftershocks that may or may not be felt by humans. Aftershock. In seismology, an aftershock is a smaller earthquake that follows a larger earthquake in the same area of the main shock, caused as the displaced crust adjusts to the effects of the main shock. Large earthquakes can have hundreds to thousands of instrumentally detectable aftershocks, which steadily decrease in magnitude and frequency according to known laws. In some earthquakes, the main rupture happens in 2 or more steps, resulting in multiple main shocks. These are known as doublet earthquakes, and in general can be distinguished from aftershocks in having similar magnitudes and nearly identical seismic waveforms. Main shocks are followed by the much weaker aftershocks. This was known recently, however this was portrayed in the Quran 1,400 years before it was discovered. Quran. On the day when the earthquake shakes, followed by the successor. Miracles of Quran. Miracles of Quran. Subduction. Sinking of plates. 1,400 years ago people thought that rocks can fall to the ground and that's it. Nobody knew that rocks can sink any further underground. However, the Quran portrays rocks that sink further below the surface. Skeptics claim that whoever wrote the Quran made a mistake. Rocks on the surface cannot sink any further. Today geologists found rocks that sank more than 400 kilometers below the surface. The highest point on Earth is in the Himalayas at Mount Everest, 8.8 kilometers high. It turned out that this mountain has roots about 250 kilometers deep. The larger Asian plate forced the Indian plate deep into the mantle, a process called subduction, sinking it at least 155 miles, 250 kilometers, down under the surface, a new study in the May edition of the journal Geology suggests. This plunge is double the depth of previous estimates. This subduction carries water inside rocks from the surface down to the middle mantle. Scientists found huge amounts of water inside a mineral 410 to 660 kilometers below the surface. There's as much water in Earth's mantle as in all the oceans. The deep Earth holds about the same amount of water as our oceans. That's the conclusion from experiments on rocks typical of those in the mantle transition zone, a global buffer layer 410 to 660 kilometers beneath us that separates the upper from the lower mantle. If our estimation is correct, it means there's a large amount of water in the deep Earth, says Hongjian Fei at the University of Bayreuth in Germany. The total amount of water in the deep Earth is nearly the same as the mass of all the world's ocean water. The results add to mounting evidence that there is much more water than expected beneath us, mostly locked up within the crystals of minerals as ions rather than liquid water. New scientists, there's as much water in Earth's mantle as in all the oceans. The high pressure down there breaks down all rocks. But from this discovery we know that the water and rocks from the surface sank more than 400 kilometers beneath Earth's surface. This was known recently, however this was portrayed in the Quran 1,400 years before it was discovered. Quran. Then after that your hearts hardened like rocks, or even harder. For there are some rocks from which rivers gush out, and from them that crack and water comes out from them, and from them that descend in awe of Allah. Allah is not unaware of what you do. And from them that descend in awe of Allah, here the rocks and water are descending below the surface, but the Quran didn't say rocks or water anymore, because at that depth rocks break down and the water is not liquid anymore, but rather in the form of ions inside minerals. If the Quran said that sinking rocks remain intact, it would have been a mistake. Fault lines. Cracks and faults in Earth. Fault. In geology, a fault is a planar fracture or discontinuity in a volume of rock, across which there has been significant displacement as a result of rock mass movement. Large faults within the Earth's crust result from the action of plate tectonic forces, with the largest forming the boundaries between the plates, such as subduction zones or transform faults. Energy release associated with rapid movement on active faults is the cause of most earthquakes. A fault plane is the plane that represents the fracture surface of a fault. A fault trace or fault line is a place where the fault can be seen or mapped on the surface. A fault trace is also the line commonly plotted on geologic maps to represent a fault. Earth's crust is full of cracks and fault lines. This was only known recently, however this was portrayed in the Quran 1,400 years before it was discovered. Quran. And the earth that has faults.